Have you ever heard of a war fought over a few tiny islands at the very edge of the world? A place with more sheep than people, battered by the fierce winds of the South Atlantic. This is the story of the Falkland Islands, or as they're known in Argentina, Las Malvinas. And in 1982, these remote specks of land sparked a dramatic and intense conflict between Argentina and the United Kingdom. So, how did it all begin? To understand the war, we have to rewind the clock. Way back, both Britain and Argentina have long-standing claims to the islands. Britain's claim dates back to the 17th and 18th centuries. Based on early exploration and a settlement established in 1765, the VA maintained continuous administration since 1833. On the other hand, Argentina argues it inherited the islands from Spain after gaining independence in the early 19th century. They see the British presence as a relic of colonialism on their doorstep. For generations, this dispute simmered, a point of national pride and contention, especially for Argentina. Fast forward to the early 1980s. Argentina was in a tough spot. The country was ruled by a military junta, a group of military leaders who had seized power. Their regime was facing a severe economic crisis, with soaring inflation and widespread public discontent. People were protesting in the streets, and the government's grip on power was weakening. The junta, led by General Leopoldo Galtieri, needed a distraction away to unite the country and rally support behind them. What better way than to reclaim the Malvinas? They believed a quick, successful military operation would spark a wave of patriotism and secure their political future. They also made a critical miscalculation. They gambled that Britain, a nation thousands of miles away and seemingly in decline, wouldn't have the will or the capability to fight back for these distant islands. They thought the international community would either support them or simply look the other way. It was a high-stakes bet, and they were about to find out they had read the situation completely wrong. On April 2, 1982, the gamble was made. Argentine forces launched a surprise invasion, codenamed Operation Rosario. Special forces landed near the capital, Port Stanley, quickly overwhelming the small garrison of British Royal Marines. Within hours, the Argentine flag was flying over Government House. Back in Buenos Aires, the news was met with euphoric celebrations. Crowds filled the streets, waving flags, and cheering for the recovery of their cherished islands. For a moment, it seemed the junta's plan had worked perfectly. But 8,000 miles away in London, the reaction was one of shock and outrage. The British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, was a leader, known for her resolute and uncompromising style. She famously became known as the Iron Lady. For her, the invasion was an unacceptable act of aggression against British sovereign territory and its people, the Falkland Islanders, who were British citizens. She immediately declared that diplomacy had failed and that the islands would be retaken by force, if necessary. This was a monumental challenge. Britain hadn't fought a war like this, so far from home, since World War II. It would require a massive logistical effort. But Thatcher's government didn't hesitate. In just a few days, they assembled a huge naval task force. It was an incredible sight. Aircraft carriers like HMS Hermes and HMS Invincible, destroyers, frigates, submarines, and troop carriers like the QE-2 in Canberra, which were civilian ocean liners requisitioned for war. Thousands of soldiers, sailors, and airmen set sail on the long journey south into the harsh South Atlantic winter. The world watched, wondering if this post-colonial power could still project force across the globe. The war at sea was brutal and technologically advanced. Both sides had modern navies and air forces. The first major clash came on May 2nd, when the British nuclear-powered submarine, HMS Conqueror, torpedoed the Argentine cruiser, Era General Belgrano. The sinking was a massive blow to Argentina, resulting in the loss of over 300 lives. It was controversial, as the Belgrano was outside the declared exclusion zone at the time, but the British argued it posed a threat to their task force. Following this, the Argentine Navy largely returned to port, leaving their air force and land-based forces to carry on the fight. The Argentinian pilots were incredibly brave and skillful, flying French-made Super Attendor jets armed with deadly Exocet anti-ship missiles. They posed a grave threat to the British fleet. On May 4th, they hit their most famous target, the destroyer HMS Sheffield. An Exocet missile slammed into the ship, starting a fire that raged out of control. The ship was eventually abandoned and sank. A stark reminder to the British of just how dangerous this conflict was. They lost several other ships to air attacks, including HMS Ardent, HMS Antelope, and the container ship Atlantic Conveyor, which was carrying vital supplies and helicopters. The skies over the Falklands became a deadly battleground. By late May, the British were ready to take the fight to the land. On May 21st, British troops began their main amphibious landing at San Carlos Water, a bay on the west side of East Falkland. The location was chosen because it was somewhat sheltered from air attack, but the Argentinians soon found it, and the bay became known as Bomb Alley due to the constant low-level air raids. Despite the fierce attacks, thousands of troops from the Parachute Regiment and the Royal Marines successfully made it ashore. From their beachhead at San Carlos, The British soldiers began the grueling yomp across the island's boggy, windswept, and treeless terrain. Carrying heavy packs and equipment, they marched towards the ultimate prize, the capital, Port Stanley, which was heavily defended by thousands of entrenched Argentine soldiers. The conditions were terrible, freezing cold, wet, and miserable. But their training and determination pushed them forward. The land campaign saw some of the most intense fighting of the war. Key battles took place for strategic high ground surrounding Stanley. At Goose Green, the 2nd Battalion of the Parachute Regiment fought a long and bloody battle against a larger Argentine force. Despite being outnumbered, they secured a hard-won victory. Then came the final push for Stanley. In a series of daring night attacks, British forces captured the mountains overlooking the town. Battles for Mount Longdon, Two Sisters, and Mount Tumbledown became legendary tales of courage and close-quarters combat. With the British holding the high ground and their artillery shelling Argentine positions, the situation for the defenders in Stanley became hopeless. They were cold, demoralized, and cut off from resupply. On June 14, 1982, just 74 days after the invasion began, the Argentine commander, General Mario Menendez, formally surrendered to the British. The war was over. The aftermath was profound for both nations. For Britain, the victory was a source of immense national pride. It boosted Margaret Thatcher's popularity, leading to a landslide election victory the following year, and reasserted Britain's role on the world stage. But it came at a cost. 255 British servicemen and 3 Falkland Islanders lost their lives. For Argentina, the defeat was a national humiliation. The military junta, which had promised a glorious victory, collapsed in disgrace. The failure of the war effort directly led to the restoration of democracy in Argentina in 1983. However, the conflict left deep scars, with nearly 650 Argentine military personnel having lost their lives. The dream of reclaiming the Malvinas remains a powerful political and emotional issue in Argentina to this day. Today, the Falkland Islands remain a British overseas territory. The War of 1982 defined their modern identity and strengthened their desire to remain British. A large military presence is still maintained on the islands to deter any future aggression. The conflict was a short, sharp, and dramatic chapter in modern history. War fought with 20th century technology over a 19th century colonial dispute, reminding us how issues of sovereignty, national pride, and territory can erupt into conflict even in the most remote corners of our world. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story interesting, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into history. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.